2 months there have been massive protests in Hong Kong, up to 2 million people telling China not to take away the freedoms of the former British colony. And there has been a sometimes brutal reaction, including by pro-China gangsters, last month, bashing the protesters. Now, in just 11 years' time, China can scrap its one country, two systems deal with Britain that lets Hong Kong keep some of its autonomy under Chinese rule until then. And the protesters know they must make a stand now or they're toast in 2030. So it's disappointing, I think, that in this massive battle, the Morrison government has said virtually nothing until these small comments today from Foreign Minister Marise Payne.
Australia very much values the freedoms and the advantages of Hong Kong and the way it exists with that high degree of autonomy under the one country, two systems approach. And I would reinforce those statements, those views. We do encourage those who are protesting to engage in peaceful protest. I think it is very important to avoid violence in these situations, and we would never endorse violent activity.
Now, joining me is the panel, Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching and Liberal Senator James Patterson. James, we're seeing one of the most, I think, important fights for freedom that we are going to see in our lifetime. This is really symbolic because there's Taiwan to come and others. Has the government done enough to help preserve the freedoms of Hong Kong and its 7 million people?
I think we have, Andrew, but you're right, it is a crucially important issue for the region and the world. Hong Kong's an amazing place and it is a beacon for the region and the world. What Hong Kong shows is that if you plant the seed of liberal democracy and free market capitalism, you tend it well, then it can succeed anywhere in the world, no matter the culture, the language, the ethnicity of the people that are around it. And perhaps that's why the Chinese Communist Party fears it as much as they do. I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of the people of Hong Kong about the extradition treaty with China. I was involved in the fight that we had here in Australia to prevent Australia from having an extradition treaty with China, but the threat posed by it is much greater for the people of Hong Kong than it was for us, because effectively it would bring Hong Kong under the complete and final control of the Chinese Communist Party and their unfair, unjust criminal justice system. So they are right to fight, and we have a great sympathy with their fight.
Kimberley?
Well, I agree with James. I think that what we're also seeing is the decrease in importance for Hong Kong as a financial centre for China. I think Shanghai has grown in that regard, and so China may well be willing to, to start to interfere, I think, more in Hong Kong because they don't need to maintain the very important aspects of Hong Kong that they've had to in the past in order to, to have it as a financial centre for China. So I think that's problematic. I think it's problematic in that this kind of reminds me of Tiananmen Square, in that there was a long lead time of protests and then the troops and the tanks were sent in. Yeah. And this kind of reminds me of that. I also feel it's...
China's been really issuing warning, haven't they? China has, in the last couple of days, been issuing warnings to shut up or something will happen. But, Kimberley, has Australia done enough? Has Australia done enough?
Well, I think at some point, whether it's Hong Kong or Taiwan, of course, we've seen some comments in regard to that as well from Beijing recently. I think that we are going to have to make more, not just statements, Andrew. I think, we're going to have to decide what kind of country we are and what we really will, I think, what values we ascribe to and what we will help in our region to support and to protect.
I know. I wonder whether Australia's Australians are ready to make the sacrifices that will necessarily mean to fight for our values. I think we've got some very hard choices coming up.